One
does.
thing I wanted to talk to you about is being in Nashville, being a published writer in Nashville during the 80s as a female songwriter. I know that had to be a struggle, right? Because females really weren't getting much notice back then.
It was a total boys club back
Right.
then. There were
Yeah.
only four girl writers, and I didn't get any respect in the
Yeah.
beginning. But then, as I started getting cuts, the guys begrudgingly began to write with me because they thought, well, maybe we'll get a cut if we write with her. And then I all of a sudden I had a Whitney Houston cut and a Melissa Manchester cut, and then an Air Supply cut and a Journey cut. All these, I mean, I exploded, but I didn't think that much of it because I was still going from doing that to pouring coffee for people.
Right.
And sometimes when I was on the airplane, working, I'd get an idea and I'd hand the coffee pot to, one of the passengers and say, "Sir, can you hold this for just a moment?" And I'd pull out a pad and act like I was counting, but
Yeah.
really I was writing lyrics. And then I'd
Yeah.
put it back in my pocket and say, "Thank you, sir." And I'd take the pot again. So lots of times when I was flying, I would still think of good ideas.
So you talked about what was it, Bob Montgomery earlier with the Janie Fricky cut. He was
Yeah.
really kind of stepping out for you then, helping you out
Well,
before you were
he was
really
nice. He did
exploding.
that. Another time, I got Jim Ed Norman was. I had pitched the song for Gary Morris and Crystal Gale, called "What If We Fall in Love,"
Hmm.
and it hadn't gotten to Jim Ed when I asked the A&R lady. So as I was walking out of Warner Brothers, I asked the girl at the desk in front. I said, "Where's Jim Ed right now?" And she goes, "Oh, he's over cutting it at Soundstage." And I went, "Thank you." And I went over the Soundstage and he was cutting Gary Moore's Crystal Gale, and I had a cassette of the song. And I went up to the redheaded lady that sat at the desk and I said, "Would you do me a favor? If I give you this cassette and a little note, would you hand it to Jim Ed when he comes out of the studio going to the restroom?" And she goes, "Sure." So I wrote on the note, "Jim Ed, I know you're already cutting, but do yourself a favor and listen to this song before you're done." And I left. And the next day, I was out in LA and I was writing with Melissa Manchester. And somehow Jim Ed found me, called, and said, "We cut your song." So you never know. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. One time I was I bribed the guard over at Conway Twitty's house up north of town, and he let me hide in the bushes. And when Conway was coming out of his gate, I jumped in front of his
Oh,
car,
you did
and then
not.
I did, and then I turned over to his driver's side, and I said, "Sir, here's a song for you." And he went, "Okay, thanks." And he drove off, and he probably just threw it out the window because he never did cut it. So sometimes I got things cut, sometimes I didn't. I just kept trying.
Yeah, that comes from your mom. Don't be afraid to ask, right?
Yeah, don't never be afraid to ask. So
Yep, yep, I
yeah,
love that.
you got
So,
to believe in yourself, and if you do, like when I first started coming to Nashville, I would go to a publisher and I'd play them a couple songs, and then they would play me a couple of songs that they had and say, "What do you think?" And I was always thinking, why are they asking me what I think? Because they look at young people as the audience of the future. So
mhm,
they wanted to know what songs I like because I was young.
yeah.
So that's part of it too. You
One
have
thing
to
I
believe in yourself, and if you do, they'll believe in you too.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to talk to you about, and I love chatting with songwriters about this subject as well, is kind of being a solo writer, 100%er as they call it, and co-writing, and kind of the pros and cons of that. So throughout your career, what would you say were the pros and cons versus, a solo write versus a co-writing experience?
Okay. Well, if you're writing by yourself, it's just got to be good. You got to compare it to stuff on the radio and see if it fits. If you're co-writing, there's a couple of things. Be on time. Before you get there, eat some food because you want food in your belly, because when you get there to co-write, you want to be thinking about the lyrics and the melody. You don't want to be thinking biscuit, 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 because you're
Yeah.
hungry.
Hmm.
So and you want to be polite. You want to listen to what they have to say, and then hopefully they'll listen to what you have to say. So when you co-write, it has to be, you have to be polite. Golden rule, like I talked about.
Do you feel like some of that too is like recognizing your own strengths and weaknesses and trying to find the opposite in a co-writer? So in other words,
Oh yeah,
if your strengths are lyrical, you would want to find somebody whose strengths are melodic, right?
yeah, exactly. Like there's one song I wrote with Steve Dorff. He's got incredible
Oh,
melodies.
I love
He
Steve.
did
Yes.
Coca-Cola Cowboy and
Yeah.
Oh, I Just Fall in Love Again and so
Steve's
many
been on
beautiful
this show.
songs.
He's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, he's amazing. And so I wrote a really good lyric and with his wife, and then he came in and finished it with us. It's called "How Can They Call This Cheating?" And the hook is, "How can they call this cheating when it's the most honest I've been in years?" And he put the most gorgeous melody to it.
Yeah.
So, and now on some things, on some of the songs I've written by myself, like the Gary Morris Crystal Gale, "What If We Fall in Love?" I wrote that by myself. I wrote it on a layover in Philadelphia in the hotel hallway on an upright piano with drunken Shriners running behind me. And they'd try to stop and talk to me, and I'd go, "Leave me alone." And that's when I wrote the song. So you never know. I write some good melodies by myself, but if I get a chance to write with a Steve Dorff, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I'll be the lyricist. I'll let him be the musician.
Yeah, absolutely, and it just seems smart in that way. Steve is a very good example of someone that I'm talking about, just being such a melodic genius, and he's always had the knack of knowing which lyricists to partner his music with, and even that is a talent in itself. Steve's a perfect example of that. Um,
Yeah.
One thing you did talk about earlier is stage fright, and I know you've dealt with this throughout your career. So, how do you get over that stage fright and being a performing songwriter in addition to just
Well,
a staff writer?
it's like riding a bicycle. The more you ride a bicycle, the easier it becomes. And I had one of my uh, voice teachers. I only took a couple lessons in my whole life. I just figured it out pretty much by myself. But she told me, if you ever feel nervous, like if you're singing in front of a bunch of A&R people, she said, just stick your stomach out, because when you stick your stomach out, it pulls your diaphragm down, which makes you inhale a lot of air. And once you have a lot of air, you can easily sing, because if you're like deer in the headlights and you're frozen, you don't have enough breath to
Hmm.
sing. So all you have to do is remember to stick your stomach out. That'll suck the air in, and then you can sing.
I love
That was
that.
a great piece of advice.
Yeah, I love that. Like it's just all about muscle memory and repetition, and eventually it becomes second nature, right?
Right. And another one, Susie Bogus in LA, we were in a bathroom at a studio together, and she said, "Here's one thing you should know. If you're going to hit some high notes, don't lift your chin up to do it, because that'll tighten your throat and you won't
Hmm.
be able to get the, keep your chin down and just visualize the note coming up high above. And that's how to hit the high notes."
I love that very
And then
much.
and one thing I tell people so that they can sing, some people when they sing, they get a falsetto and they don't do well. And I said, you have to project and have a good loud voice. And the way to do it is picture your dog trotting out and almost crossing the street, and a car's coming and you're at the other end of the yard. You wouldn't go, "Hey, watch out." You'd go, "Hey, watch out." You'd yell it loud. So when you sing, you don't want to sing soft, you want to sing loud. So just think of how you yell, and that's how you can project your voice.
Very cool.